Thanks for listening to Curious Cat, the podcast that examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. In my time exploring and sharing with you the mysteries and wonders of the Cascade Mountain Range, I have collected some ghost stories, and I wanted to share a few with you today just to lighten up your load. From Mount St. Helens, this remarkable story of the death of a beloved grandmother and a discovery of an undeveloped roll of film. This comes from Cairo News 7. A Portland woman who finds old cameras and develops forgotten film has discovered unseen photos of the Mount St. Helens eruption. I run into the Big Goodwill in Southeast Portland and check all their film cameras for exposed but undeveloped rolls of film, said Katie Dimoff, who's a photographer herself. In May, I bought an Argus C2, which would have been produced around 1938, and it had a damaged roll of Kodachrome slide film in it. Dimoff dropped it off at a Portland shop that develops vintage film. When she picked it up, a message was left on her package of photographs. It reads, "Is this from the Mount St. Helens eruption?" 40 years ago, 57 people lost their lives amid raining ash throughout Washington state in the wake of the Mount St. Helens explosion. Journalists and residents alike captured moments of the volcano's notorious eruption in 1980. Thousands of people to this day still watch their surreal video and look into chilling photos of the lateral blast that took out the north side of the mountain. But Dimoff's images show a new perspective of the plume cloud that haunted the Northwest. Some of the shots showed Mount St. Helens way off in the distance with just little puffs of ash from the beginning of the eruption, with a Longview Bridge at the Oregon-Washington border in view. So it must have been shot from just off Highway 30, Dimoff told Cairo News. Two of the shots show a larger ash cloud with John Gum Elementary School in the foreground in St. Helens, Oregon. Another shot included a family in a backyard who I'm hoping know the story of the camera. After the Oregonian picked up Dimoff's story, a man, Mel Purvis, contacted the publication that he had read their story and recognized himself in the photos. Dimoff shared the update with Cairo 7 News about Purvis, who identified his wife, his grandmother, and son in the photo that was taken in a Eugene yard decades ago. Purvis believes the newly found Mount St. Helens photos are from his grandmother's camera. His grandmother died in 1981, and he isn't sure how her camera made it to Goodwill. That picture is one of the last I have of my grandmother, Purvis told Cairo News 7. His mother, the daughter of his grandmother, died on Saturday. He said his discovery gave him goosebumps. A few days later, this shows up out of the blue, he said. I am not at all a religious person, but kind of makes you wonder a little. The timing of it is remarkable, I guess. Soon the camera will be back in Purvis' family as Dimoff will be mailing it and the prints to him. My spiritual self loves the way that true story evolved and resolved. Here's the woman in white legend from Mount St. Helens. I found this ghost story about Mount St. Helens retold by Adam Woog. Rumor has it a woman in white haunts the Mount St. Helens region. She's been encountered hitching rides up and down the roads near the peak. When a driver stops to help, she gets into the back seat, and then during the course of casual conversation, she predicts that the mountain will erupt with a specific 2-day period. Then she disappears while the car is in motion. From the Seattle PI, a police chief from nearby Morton said, "We picked up a rumor that some people picked up a lady with a white gown on. She gave her warning, and when they looked in the back seat, she was gone, and they were going 60 miles an hour down the road. But I don't know what they were smoking or drinking." Mount Baker has many ghost stories. The Wellington train tragedy is a ghost-laden hike. The town of Wellington ceased to be, at least in name, long before it officially became a ghost town. The town was founded in 1893 at the west portal of the Cascade Tunnel along the Great Northern Railway. The town included a train depot that was unfortunately destined to become the site of the deadliest avalanche in U.S. history. On March 1st, 1910, a passenger train and a mail train were stuck at the Wellington depot waiting out a blizzard that had been raging for 9 straight days. During the night, while most people were sleeping, an avalanche hit the trains and the station, quickly sweeping everything about 150 feet downhill into the Ty River Valley. 96 people were killed in that event. Only 23 people survived. In October 1910, Wellington was quietly renamed Ty to ease the fears of travelers who would associate the name Wellington with this tragic event. In the same month that the town was renamed Ty, work began on the snow sheds designed to protect those rails and passing trains from future avalanches. Some of these sheds are still standing today. Ty was abandoned in 1929 when the second Cascade Tunnel, which is still in use to this day, was completed, negating the need for trains to pass through the town. To reach Wellington, you follow the original path of the Great Northern Railroad along what is now the eastern portion of the Iron Goat Trail near Stevens Pass. Head east on the trail from the parking lot to see old foundations and the west entrance to the original Cascade Tunnel. Walk west from the parking lot to enter the snow sheds to reach the site of the 1910 avalanche. Note, like other railroads in Washington, this track was laid by 800 workers or more, many of them Japanese immigrants. The Wing Luke Museum offers hiking tours of this history. Gary Christ's 2008 book, The White Cascade, chronicles the historic avalanche for anyone interested in learning more about this particular point in history. I found an interesting story from the Three Sisters area in Oregon, but first there's a death ritual practiced in parts of the Cascades you might see remnants of if you hike the area, and it calls to mind a certain type of grave used by some Plains tribes called a scaffold grave. It is exactly what it sounds like. A scaffold was built of 4 upright poles to hold the deceased closer to the sky. Another tradition were the tree graves, found more along the Cascade Range. From Wiki, I found this. A number of Native Americans used a burial tree as the last resting place for a dead relative, either as the general rule along with a scaffold or as an alternative to a grave. The corpse was wrapped up carefully in a robe or blankets and either placed in a fork of a tree or tied to a heavy branch. Both grown persons and small children were laid to rest this way. A burial tree could carry more than one dead person. Maximilian Zoo Wide saw burial trees with red painted trunks and branches among the Assiniboine Indians. It seems any tree was proper. Cottonwood is mentioned by travelers on the Great Plains, for example, as well as pine and cedar in the Pacific Northwest. The dead could be placed from around 6 feet up in the tree to close to the top. Some of the belongings of the deceased were often placed near the corpse. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, keep your eye out for unusual trees when you're on hikes. Ones where the middle seems to have a large gaping gap, enough to fit a canoe. Those are often canoe burials, which was also a custom of local tribes. They would bury their dead in a boat within the branches of a young tree to transport them to the next realm. The tree would often grow around the person and boat before both were reclaimed by the forest floor. Let's turn to Oregon, the Multnomah Falls Trail, Columbia River Gorge. It's one of the most unexpected haunted hikes in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, did you know that one of the most well-known Columbia River Gorge waterfalls, Multnomah Falls, has a very creepy past? Long before the famous bridge was constructed, there is a story told that an indigenous woman jumped off the top of the falls to save her village from a spreading illness. miss. People often claim to feel her presence in the mist. However, the most common sightings are during wintertime, when visitors say they can spot her face in the white water. If you dare, you can hike to the top of the falls yourself. The short 2.6-mile out and back trail can be reached from the Multnomah Falls parking lot. From ancient origins comes this: Crater Lake. Wizard Island is only one of two small islands on Oregon's Crater Lake. This little island is in the form of an almost cylindrical cone, named in reference to pointy hats. In warm months, park rangers ferry visitors out to the island to explore, though Klamath tribes swear against this. Wizard Island has developed lore of its own over these years because many rangers have repeatedly claimed to have seen human-looking figures and fires burning on the island at night when the park is utterly desolate. The stories are consistent, and when rangers swiftly motor out to the island to investigate, they find no one present and no fire at all. Is there a Crater Lake monster? A blogger at Cryptozoocity asked the question in a recent post. It states, stories of creatures residing in the deep waters of Crater Lake have been around for a long time, from tales of dragons living there told by ancient peoples to settlers. In May 2002, the monster story resurfaced in the Fort Myers News Star newspaper. A woman in Albany, Georgia named Maddie Hatcher recalled her visit to Crater Lake when she was a child. She caught a glimpse of something strange out on a rowboat with some of her friends when something a block long swam under the boat and gave them all a good scare. She said this: "I have never been so scared in my life. What we saw that day was a monster. To me, it looked like a dragon. I know why the Indians call that place Lost Lake. They say monsters live in it. I believe them. I know because I saw one." From Ranker.com comes a list of truly terrifying myths, lore, and legends from the Cascade Mountains and Forest. Writer Justin Andrus writes this, quote, "There's something magical about the Pacific Northwest. Maybe it's the geography that inspires Pacific Northwest legends. Those towering trees, mammoth mountains, and icy waters seem like the perfect place for fantastic creatures to hide. Stories about this region have been told for centuries. American Indian mythology connects the land with powerful beings like the Thunderbird. In more recent years, people swap tales of the Sasquatch, the gentle or not so gentle giant that supposedly roams remote areas. Some of these Pacific Northwest myths were first told to explain away the natural world. Others seem to simply exist for entertainment, but they all offer a thoughtful, new perspective on a corner of the U.S. that's often seen as remote and isolated. Straight from the tales of the native peoples, here are some of the most fascinating myths and legends from the forests of the Northwest. Number 1, the powerful mountain spirits. I can't argue with that, but here's what Andrus says. Throughout the stories of the myriad tribes of Native Americans who populated the Pacific Northwest, there is a constant, the mountain. High peaks often represented the focal point of their unique mythological foundations. Powerful forces were often said to live at the tops of the mountains, whether they were benevolent creatures or evil spirits. Mount Rainier, for instance, was supposedly crowned by a lake of fire in which a dark force lingered. Anyone who climbed above the snow line was surely doomed. I have to add that above the timberline is a recurring theme in Cascade ghost stories. Specifically, Mount Shasta comes to mind. You don't have to scratch far into that surface of David Paulides' missing 411 cases to learn to avoid the timberline. Number 2, the Sasquatch who became a tree. Many native tribes tell stories about wild, hairy men. They all go by different names, but in the Pacific Northwest, the title that stuck is Sasquatch. This creature often has special abilities too, ranging from super strength to invisibility. The people of the Colville Confederation once followed Sasquatch, who they called Scanicum, to a ravine surrounded by trees. There, the creature vanished without a trace. The pursuers knew he was hiding. His natural camouflage allowed him to blend in seamlessly with the trees. Number 3, the evil spirit of Mount Hood. According to legend, the people who lived around Mount Hood were once as tall as trees. Then an evil spirit took up residence at the top of the mountain and began spewing lava and molten rock, destroying the surrounding land. The God Changer appeared to the people's chief in a dream, telling him to conquer the evil spirit in order to save everyone. The chief climbed the summit and began hurling rocks back at the spirit, and the resulting epic battle lasted for days. The chief ultimately defeated the spirit, but when he looked back, he realized their conflict, it had decimated the land. Heartbroken, he wept himself to death. As for the people, they managed to survive, but the burned land caused them to starve and shrink. Number 4, Chief Wakish and the first totem pole. Among all the chiefs, the Kwakuti say Wakish had never had a dance. This fact shamed him to the point that he walked into the woods to fast for 4 days in search of an answer. Falling asleep in the mountains, Wakish awoke to find himself on the back of a great bird raven with frogs sitting on his chest. The two benevolent creatures took Wakish around the world. One day, the chief saw a wooden house with a totem pole in front. Within the house, a group of animals danced merrily and sang incredible songs. Wakish asked Raven to stop so he might learn the secrets of these songs in this house. Thanks to the charity of Frog and Mouse who lived inside that wooden house, Wakish was granted the use of the house and the totem pole for one dance. So Wakish returned home with his dance, inspiring shame and jealousy among all the other chiefs. When the dance was done, the wooden house and the totem pole disappeared. In his thanks, Wakish crafted his own house and totem pole. The people called it Kalakuyu Wish, the pole that holds up the sky. Number 5, Kamush and the Northern Lights. The Klamath tribe told a story about Kamush, who grew from the ashes of the Northern Lights and created the world with the help of the morning star. At that point, the earth was barren, so Kamush planted the grass and trees and populated the world with animals. Kamush's work wasn't done there, though. He traveled to the place of the dark and danced for 5 nights with the spirits who dwelled there. On the 12th day, Shell, the sun, rose on the earth and dried up all the spirits into bones. Kamush gathered up the bones and traveled the world, scattering them 2 by 2. They eventually became the first people. In the comments below the blog post, many people came forward with their own brief accounts of a creature in Crater Lake. Here are a few. I swear to God I saw this with a boyfriend back in 2002. That is why I looked up this story to see if anyone else has also. We were not on the lake, but on a very clear day, we were looking down at it from above. And at the same time, we both saw an enormous, dark, organic shape that appeared to be swimming. Both of our jaws dropped because it was easily the size of a small aircraft. We checked with one another immediately. Did you see that? We both had. Never in my life have I seen anything like it. Another account reads this way. When I was a kid 40 years or so ago, my family and I visited this lake. I was standing where the telescope deal is located and looking down at the lake. I saw something swimming, or rather moving down on the water that left a wake. 3, if I remember right, like what a boat would leave, if you know what I mean. Both sides moving out in a V pattern. Then it vanished or went underwater. I always wondered what it was. It had to be very large. Still wondering. The final account is very detailed. October 7th, 2018, my wife and I were returning to Crater Lake Lodge after hiking to the top of Garfield Peak. We were on the trail 1,500 feet from the trailhead, and he gave the exact geolocation, so follow the link in the show notes to it. When I noticed something spreading across the surface of the water below, its approximate location was, and again he gives the geolocation for it. At first glance, I thought it was a boat. It was making waves and traveling at 5 miles per hour. But then I observed a shape that extended from the boat under the water. The sun was behind us and the water's surface was much smoother than usual. This made for perfect viewing conditions where there was no glare and we could see into the deep water. I noticed before seeing this object, I could actually see several spots where ridges from the bottom of the lake were vaguely visible from our position as fuzzy orange spots, which contrasted with the blue waters. On the surface, this thing was moving north to south. The body under the water was stretched out to the east. From our vantage point and distance, it looked like a long, very skinny worm. It sped across the surface for about a minute, then submerged and disappeared. At that time, I called ahead to my wife. Within 3 minutes, a similar object appeared 100 yards north of the first sighting. I'm glad my wife was able to see this in time. It was a very unusual experience that still does not fit with my understanding of the natural world. I would guess the worm creature was 3 to 5 feet in diameter, 100+ feet in length. Before we part ways, strap on backpacks, and head into the altitude, I wanted to share one final spooky location, the Santa Lucia Mountains in Central California. They're home to the Dark Watchers. From Wikipedia, the Dark Watchers, also known by early Spanish settlers as Los Vigilantes Oscuros, is a name given to a group of entities in California folklore purportedly seen observing travelers along the Santa Lucia Mountains. The Dark Watchers are described as tall, sometimes giant-sized, featureless dark silhouettes, often adorned with brimmed hats or walking sticks. They are most often reported to be seen in the hours around twilight and dawn. They are said to be motionless and watch travelers from the horizon along the mountain range. According to legend, no one has seen one up close, and if someone were to approach them, they disappear. From Mysterious Universe comes this. What have come to be known as the Dark Watchers are typically said to be very tall human entities, ranging in height from 7 feet tall all the way up to around 15 feet tall, dressed all in black and wearing flowing cloaks and wide brim hats, with many sightings also mentioning some sort of staves or sticks in the being's hands, Brent Swanser wrote. While sometimes attributed to the Chumash people who historically inhabited the central and southern coastal regions of California, nothing analogous to the legend appears to exist in their mythology. When Spanish settlers first moved into the area, they were said to have witnessed the Dark Watchers. The Dark Watchers are most famously given a brief mention in John Steinbeck's work, The Flight, including in the 1938 collection of his short stories, The Long Valley. Pepe looked suspiciously back every minute or so, and his eyes sought the tops of the ridges ahead. Once, on a white barren spur, he saw a black figure for a moment, but he looked quickly away, for it was one of the Dark Watchers. No one knew who the Watchers were nor where they lived, but it was better to ignore them and never to show interest in them. They did not bother one who stayed on the trail and minded his own business. Along with this, Watchers are also referenced by poet Robinson Jeffers in this titular poem of his 1937 collection, Such Counsels You Gave to Me and Other Poems. He thought it might be one of the Watchers, who are often seen in this length of coast range, forms that look human to human eyes, but certainly are not human. They come from behind ridges to watch, but when he approached it, he recognized the shabby clothes and pale hair, and even the averted forehead and concave line from the eye to the jaw, so that he was not surprised when the figure turning toward him in the twilight showed his own face. Then it melted and merged into the shadows beyond it. By the way, John Steinbeck's son Thomas Steinbeck would grow up to report having seen the Dark Watchers during his childhood, and later, along with artist Benjamin Breaux, collaborate on a book titled In Search of the Dark Watchers, where they go into the history of the legend and interview locals who claim to have seen them, such as famed Big Sur resident Billy Post. According to newspaper archives in the mid-60s, a Monterey Peninsula local and former high school principal went on a hiking trip into the mountains when he suddenly spotted a dark figure standing on a rock and surveying the area. When the principal called out to the other hikers, the creature vanished. Wikipedia offers some explanations. Illusion, hallucinations, or misinterpretation of natural stimulus brought on by exhaustion or isolation have been proposed by psychologists. Infrasound, which can be generated by wind, can cause feelings of unease and anxiety in some people and is frequently connected to paranormal sightings. An optical illusion known as the Brocken specter is a plausible explanation for this legend, they write. A Brocken specter is also called a mountain specter, and it can occur in certain atmospheric conditions when the sun is at a particular angle. The subject's shadow can be cast onto a cloud bank around them, creating the illusion of a large, shadowy humanoid figure. SF Gate adds, if you want to meet a dark watcher, you should bring a gift. Steinbeck's mother, Olive Hamilton, brought fruit or sometimes flowers. Steinbeck's son, Thomas, said his grandmother, a school teacher, was no fabulous, but she believed firmly in the Dark Watchers. She told her children and grandchildren she left fruit or nuts on her way to school in Big Sur. On the way back, there would be flowers in their place. Multiple sources claim they appear between late afternoon and twilight. I hope you enjoyed this little jaunt into the Cascades to talk about some ghostly apparitions. Until next week, stay curious. I love you.